Okay, welcome everyone. It is 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. We are doing our Tuesday talk, of course. This week, I am so excited and grateful to have Corey P. Paris, who is the new president of Connecticut Young Dems with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting because you just got into your position.
Yeah.
So that's huge. And we've known each other a little bit for a few years. So I'm excited because I haven't seen you in person even prior to COVID for quite a while.
I
So
know.
this is good.
It's hard to get from the top of the state to the bottom of the state, without there being a great convening of Democrats to bring us together.
That's true. And we're not going to have the big one we normally have in June, unfortunately, or we haven't had that one. So it's been a little more challenging than normal. So I just want to kick it off by saying, congratulations. We are all so excited to have you. I am on the upper end. I always joke, I get invited to these Young Dems and things, and I keep saying, I'm out of that window, but thank you so much.
I'm going to be there in a couple of years. It's funny, Democrats have sent their congratulations and Republicans have sent their condolences, which means that it must be a good thing that I'm in this role if they're sending their condolences, because they must be afraid of the good work that we can accomplish together.
Yeah, and that's exciting. Listen, I was excited when I saw it was you. I was thrilled, both for you and for us. So I think that's wonderful. So I was wondering if you wanted to start out. I think that you probably have shared this on other platforms, but if you could just give me some of your goals moving forward for what you're thinking about as president of Connecticut Young Dems.
Gosh, I think people are probably sick of me talking about my goals. Like, I was walking through Fairway the other day, grocery shopping, and some woman said, do you want the broccoli? And I said, actually, I really would like to work on getting women of color elected to office. And I went through this whole spiel as to what CTYD is doing. But I appreciate you allowing for me to have the platform to talk about our goals. Some folks may feel that they're lofty and may feel that they are pie in the sky, but I believe that they are the right goals for this moment. And it says a lot that we have to answer the call to building a more inclusive and equitable and diverse party. I think we often talk about us being under this big tent, and we truly feel this way on key issues. And of course, we're representative of so many spectrums, right? Because people in an overwhelming number support us. But we're not actually practicing what we support based on policy and based on people who we are having run for office. And that's challenging. And no disrespect, certainly, to women out there. And I think I want to have a disclaimer that as we talk about race to all of my brothers and sisters across the state, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. We don't mean this in a disparaging way, but we are going to say, white women may have had a little bit of an easier opportunity to run for office, and their movement for women's rights has been advanced far more aggressively than that of the rights of people of color. And that's challenging, right? I believe that we have to do more work, and that's where we're going to start doing this work. So it's not that, first and foremost, let me start there. What's most important for us is to make sure that young people are registered to vote, that they are organized, and that they are engaged in the political process, and that they want to run for office. That's something that's so vital to this process, to sustaining a more robust future for our party and for our country. Secondly, making sure that we're going to place focus on putting more efforts and more resources in communities of color, in urban communities, with those DTCs, to give GOTV resources to get young people out to vote in this election. Because Politico just reported that nearly 37% of African-American men, African-American young voters, don't know if they're going to vote for Joe Biden because they are so worried, right? They're tired of the empty promises of the Democratic Party not actually having legislation to help the African-American community. And we want to focus on women of color, Black women running for office and getting elected to office and sustaining that movement. Aside from that, we want to do the same thing with Latinos in the state and making sure that they are engaged and focused. And we're building the most dynamic plan that we have yet is Build the Bench, which is an initiative that we're working on with DNA campaigns to train, identify, and really build these leaders at a young age within CTYD so that they can run for office within the next 2 years, which I think is vital. I have no disrespect to any of our constitutional leaders, to any of our legislators, to any of our mayors, to even the leaders of our party. But it's an aging party. And it's time that we start getting our Kennedys and our Humphreys and our McGoverns and our Obamas and our Clintons and our Gores out there and to run for office. Because if we don't, the party can't stay gray forever. And I think that that's where our focus should be, and it's where our focus will be in these next few months.
I share some of that frustration being on, as I said, the older side of that young
You're
demographic.
always going to be young. I give you the credit for that.
But I feel like, especially the last time I ran,
Right.
you did see all of these women, especially coming up. We are so lucky in Connecticut to have two excellent training programs, both Emerge Connecticut,
Sure.
which trains Democratic women, and then the Yale School, which was the campaign, that was the women's campaign school, and it's now the campaign school at Yale. And obviously that one is bipartisan, but the fact that we have these training opportunities within Connecticut for women and people who want to run women's campaigns, and that's, or identify as women, that is the most, I think it's critical that we have that, and especially making sure that the doors are open, obviously, for all women of color, and enormous, preferably a groundswell
Right.
would be fantastic. So I love to hear that there are other groups that are working on it, actively working on it, helping people realize that it is, I think sometimes it's the translating the work that you've done in the community, especially the activists, translating that into a resume to then run for office. I think that's
I say this to people often, right? The Republicans, we don't give them enough credit.
mm-hmm.
They are good at organizing.
Yep.
They are good with falling in line behind whichever candidate they decide to nominate and sticking with that candidate and seeing that candidate through, which is why they win elections. They are good with training and building a bench of young leaders to follow behind those who are leaving after certain election cycles. And that's where Democrats have not done very well. And it's not that I am disparaging my party, but it's because I care so much about my party that I want us to focus on this. And it's the same argument, right? I've had people, leaders of DTCs across the state, say to me, well, you can't just focus on Black lives or Black people or people of color. You got to focus on everyone. It can't just be initiatives for people of color. I'm saying to myself, it's not that we're not focusing on anyone else. We're saying that Black lives and, the overarching argument of what we're discussing tonight, that Black candidates and Black campaigns and Black organizers and Black issues, they matter too. Same with Latinos, they matter too. And so when we've elevated the voices of many women in the state, and I think Connecticut has been one of the most trailblazing progressive states in the nation in regards to electing women to high office, and we will continue to do that. We've never had an African-American governor. We've never had an African-American or Latino or Asian American lieutenant governor. We have an Asian American attorney general and an African American treasurer. And as you know, in the party, unfortunately, it's always been, well, the African American, the treasurer's election and role, that's always to the African American community. They pick whoever they want. I mean, come on. The fact that we can't aspire to greater and better things. And up until my election, we had never had an African American president of Connecticut Young Democrats.
Right.
At 94%. Let's think about this in a logical way. African Americans vote for the Democratic Party 94% of the time, and white voters, it's consistently and drastically different.
Drastically.
So, where are our loyalties at there? And I'm not saying that just because we're voting there, we should be in those positions, but we should have the opportunity to lead. And I believe that we certainly have a great leader in our executive director with Jacqueline Cozen at the state party. We have Nancy Wyman, and now we're switching over to, I think, possibly Nancy DiNardo. But I will say that I believe that our party should embrace someone else that maybe isn't a Nancy. Not that I have any problem.
No offense to Nancy's.
No offense to Nancy's, But I do want to see us start building and changing the conversation about how we truly win elections and win the arguments about diversity, because we're not there yet.
I completely agree with you. And I think that when you talk about the Republicans and what they are good at, the other thing they are good at is starting at the municipal level and making sure that they rotate the folks, basically. It's almost like a chessboard in terms of they start out on the Board of Ed, or they started on the town council or selectmen's board, and then they move them around to the next board, so that they're basically filling, a resume. Not that that resume necessarily translates in terms of being a great state rep or a great state senator, because with a citizen legislature, we obviously want diverse experience at the state legislature. But that's my biggest concern, I guess, is that when we are eliminating those voices, when we are taking those voices out, I think about when I knocked doors last time and the stories that you hear, if those stories are not being told by the people who have lived them. I think about Johanna a lot when she tells her stories.
Yeah.
If those stories are not being told in own voices by the people who have lived them, things get lost in translation. And so I guess my question to you is, how do we hold the Democratic Party responsible, not just in Connecticut, but nationally? I'm sure you have thought about this. I'm sure you have ideas, but how do we hold the party responsible to the ideals that we all say we espouse?
Right.
At the end of the day,
Thought about it and have tried to implement it. Right. I've been, Congressman Himes said, I think it was last week. I can't get my days and my nights are mixed up. The last week where the state of the CTYB, Congressman Himes said that I came in as president in one of the most interesting times that we've ever experienced, right? Within this electoral season. And I also think as soon as I became president, I grappled with the idea of not wanting to push the idea of holding, or the notion of holding, our parties accountable and our DTCs accountable on racial equity issues. Because I didn't want to be the black guy in here now just pushing through. These are the things that we have to think about and obsess about. And not just in a professional standpoint, but now here in a standpoint that's political. That's even harder. So when I talk about this, I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart, that I say to people, if it were black people that were the oppressor for 400 years, I would be on the side of those of our of white folks trying to get white folks to be delivered from the oppression. There's no doubt about that. But that's not the case. And what I'm trying to do is to understand best how we move the focus of our party forward. And CTYD immediately, unequivocally, every executive board member agreed to the fact that we wanted to have a conversation and put out a statement and a call to action asking our DTCs, all 169 of them, to literally come out and say, this is an atrocity to our nation of what's going on here. You can't try to hide from it or not say that it's not happened, or that, make an excuse for it, or, look at the details. It is what it is. It's right in front of your face. So what we need you to do is to come up with a plan of action as to what you're going to do to combat racial equality in the state within the DTCs. I mean, when I tell you the amount of DTCs that wrote me emails and said to me that they took offense to our tone and took offense to what we said to them, and how could we not understand that they are posting on Facebook and posting on social media and they're out there protesting. Let's get this one thing clear, okay? I can go out and protest, and I can go out and stand in solidarity and wear the pink hat in agreement with women who have faced sexual harassment for the Me Too movement. That does not mean that that is creating legislation or policy to effectively end discrimination or injustice in that community for women to feel safe and equal to men in this country. I'm sorry. So your protesting is great, but it's not enough. Your call to action is great, but if it's not implemented, it's not enough. And we have to be uncomfortable with the idea of being we have to be comfortable with the idea of being comfortable. Yeah. Comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable, excuse me, to talk about these issues and to finding ways to hear everyone. But I think what we have to do is listen to what we need to do to move forward to make sure that we're not losing 94% of a loyal voting bloc that is already conservative, by the way. African Americans aren't that liberal. They just aren't. They are a conservative voting bloc that Republicans don't want to talk to. So they're saying, well, I guess I'll come back over here because at least the Democratic Party somewhat is empathetic towards the needs of my community. And I can they opened, right, the playing field for people like me to get elected to their office and serve positions to help policy, but it's not enough. And that's what we need to do. We need to Start by having more inclusive members of our party at leadership levels. Start by electing more people of color. Start by having more forums where we are talking solely on issues around Black people and people of color, and really start looking at the young leaders to give them hope, to inspire them and invigorate them so that they can one day take the mantle from us. Because what's happened is that Jack Kennedy and Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer, all these people have created us, right? They created the way for us to walk down, and somewhere along the way we became completely complacent in our state of affairs and state of being in this country. And now we've got to start all over again and start this work over again. And I don't want my kids to do that. And I know you don't want your kids to do that. And that's why it's important for us to have these conversations now.
I think that you're right. I mean, I see my kids, because I have college and high school and 10-year-old, I see them wanting to be involved. I see them grappling with being, like, okay, where is my place? And not that right now their place matters terribly much, but I think when you talk about the DTCs, I think the reason that you got those emails is that white fragility that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to say, well, because we want to believe that we are doing the right thing and all of the well-intentioned things that are out there. And it's, you're absolutely right. It's, what conversations are you willing to have with your local police department? And what conversations are you having within your DTC? And what conversations are you having with your Board of Ed? And then you level up, so to speak, then you're looking at this, the state legislature. So I had noticed that you and I liked the same tweet from Chris Murphy. It's like, it's one thing to see all these well-meaning white people out in the street talking about Black Lives Matter. It's another thing to see them accepting what the next step is, because there's going to be a whole lot of uncomfortable discussion. And I think you are 100%, 1000% right about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, because you have to sit with, did I say something that was offensive? Well, I didn't see as it offensive. Well, why? But it is. And it doesn't, it's sort of almost like when people talk about therapy, that you have to, when you get in there the first time, it's like, well, your feelings, matter in this room, even if your feelings didn't matter to your partner, or that, it's the same kind of idea, I think. Not that I can speak to it. We had a deacon at our protest the other night, very, very locally respected, childhood friend of Emmett Till, Art Miller. And he was talking about his wife being pregnant and saying, I could always say to her that, I'm with you and I'm standing with you. He goes, but I could never say, I know how you feel.
and I had this baby, right? That's the other thing. We talk about what we, I think men are, and I try to be so conscious of it. And luckily I have pistols for grandmothers who check me at every level, that they could possibly do. And we talk about things where, well, my grandfather used to say, well, I had those kids too, they're my kids. And she was like, wait a second, no, they are my children. Mm-hmm. I pushed them out, I birthed them, you just, helped me out in the process, but I'm the one that has put my blood, sweat, and tears in this. And I think that's why it's so personal for me, personal for you. It's because this is our party. We go out, we vote, we organize, we endorse candidates, we donate money. We try to bring relevance and attention to issues that are important to our party and to our communities and to us. And if we did not care, none of this would matter. If we did not care, we would be at home and we'd be perfectly fine with the state of affairs as it is. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we also have to recognize is that there's a very racist part of the Democratic Party that we're not even tackling. There's a far left-wing part of the party that, and let me take that back, because I'm going to get myself in trouble. Gosh, I wish we had pre-recorded this, because now I won't be president of Connecticut Young Dems tomorrow. But there is a different sector of the party with a lot of, progressive white folks that feel like, universal college education, free college tuition is great for us. Universal healthcare is great for us. All of this stuff is great, but it's great for our communities, right? Not necessarily for the urban communities, but for our communities. And that's the same thing that the Republicans are doing. And so what we have to do is talk about why it's important that if African Americans were not in this country and Latino Americans and Asian Americans weren't in this country, what that would look like for white folks and what that economy would look like, and how the economy, America's GDP power would be eviscerated almost immediately, because our economy is so diverse. Our social and cultural stance is so diverse. And if that was elsewhere around the world and not here, could you imagine, you know, how awful people would feel? Everyone would be a Republican, first of all, I think, just about. And that's my Joe Biden moment, that it, you know, my Charlemagne moment there. If you're not black, then you're not voting for me, I guess. I don't know. But there is value in the lives, and there's value in the stake that these communities bring to our party, and we need to recognize
I think absolutely true. Agree with all that. My question is, when is the shift going to happen in terms of, you know, like I said, all these people are at a protest. I was happy, you know, we were on the fence about doing one locally and only on the fence, not because of the issue, but
right.
because, well, how valuable is it to do one in an all white, mostly 99% white town, or, you know, and there's in the Farmington Valley, you know, that is a significant thing. We were thrilled at the turnout in Avon, thrilled at the turnout at 2 marches in Simsbury, thrilled at the turnout in Canton. Then the next question is, okay, well, Black Lives Matter goes well beyond policing.
Right.
And like you
Right.
just said about healthcare, you know, educational disparities. You know, Representative Tammy Exum mentioned the other night, which I'm not sure how many people are familiar with, how many kids in the state have had no schooling really since COVID started because of not having access to technology. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that we just have to, that's what I mean by holding the party accountable, that those ideas and the beyonds cannot get lost when this moment passes, because at some point it will pass.
Right.
So
you're absolutely right. And that's why it's incumbent upon CTYD and our state party, and for candidates, political candidates such as yourself and elected officials, to come out and say, look, what's going on right now is an important thing. And I truly believe personally that this will never be the same again. America has changed in a matter of 3 months drastically. And whether it's for the better in some ways, I think it will be, but in other ways, you know, that's to be determined. But I will say that you cannot talk about economic justice without talking about racial inequality. You cannot talk about segregation in schools without talking about racial inequality. You cannot talk about all of these really important issues. Let's think about this when we talk about healthcare. And some people may be out there asking, well, what's the big deal? Well, Black women have a higher mortality rate than that of white women in the hospitals, in the healthcare system in the United States of America.
especially if they're pregnant.
Especially if they're pregnant. And no one is talking about that. Let's talk about schooling on the college level. African-American men and women have caught up to their white counterparts to graduate from school within 4 to 6 years with a bachelor's degree. Most educated period in time that African Americans have ever been able to attain that level of education, but they're graduating with an insurmountable amount of debt compared to their white counterparts. You know, you talk about it on the K-12 level. Well, look at this. We can't even get the right amount of funding in big cities such as Bridgeport and Waterbury and Danbury, like we get in Darien and Westport and New Canaan, because, you know, obviously taxes and the mill rate needs to be different. Come on, it's a difference in demographics, and that's the biggest problem there. You talk about environmental justice. White people usually live in healthier communities throughout our state and throughout our country, where Black people don't, and Latinos don't. And that's part of the reason why COVID is being so transparent and being able to attack communities of color, whereas they're not attacking white communities. So my issue is that once we take care of that first issue, we can talk about everything else. Everything else will make a difference. And I have to say this. It takes white people to be able to take their privilege and advocate for Black people on this issue. Mm-hmm. We cannot do it without them. We absolutely not. You know, I've been watching this great series. I don't know if you've caught it on FX, Mrs. America. Mm-hmm. And I was obsessed after the first episode. I mean, every Wednesday I was watching this, but I watched as all of these women from different parties and different ethnic and racial backgrounds came together to try to push through the ERA against some, you know, lone voices on the Republican side. And even on the Republican side and conservative side of this issue, there were some women who came to say, you know what, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. I want to be outside the home. I do want to have equal rights to that of a man. If you think about this, that movement, 35 states would have never ratified the ERA within their state constitutions so that it could become, an amendment. If everyone had not band together from different walks of life to make this a prime opportunity, if white women did not use their privilege and Black women didn't use their organizing skills to make this an opportunity for all Americans, for the future of my daughters that will come, and my grandmothers and my wife that will come, all that is important. So I say this to say that we need white people on the front lines, regardless of where you are, because without you, we're going to keep seeing a repeat of things and we're not going to get any better. I really don't know what the big deal is about ending racism, but supposedly it's a huge deal.
It's funny. I reading the signs at several of the protests that were not in Hartford or Bridgeport or New Haven. And it was interesting to see, I almost think like it's a psychological window into where you are on your journey with rights in terms of what you're comfortable saying.
Right.
Or how you feel. I could be wrong about that, but it is interesting to see that. Or if you're not comfortable bringing a sign, or if you're not comfortable chanting Black Lives Matter. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for you, because you're starting, I always say we have everybody from hasn't yet called out the racist uncle at Thanksgiving, all the way to folks who've read every book and took an African-American studies, degree that's
Right.
white. So I think that we, in the same way that when people first started getting activated in 2016 after that election, I think there has to be a place where, you can sort of be willing to listen, because it has to start with listening, but also while you're listening, getting educated from a variety of sources, because Black people are not a monolith, white people are not a monolith. We cannot expect that every Black person's going to have the same response to something, or every white person's going to have the same response to something. But in the same way, and because you brought up the example of the women organizing, I feel comfortable to say when women's suffrage started, and that was a mess that, of course, Black women didn't get the vote till decades later. But women had to ask the men in power to be allies, because they had the power. You couldn't get the vote if the men in power didn't want you to have it.
It's true.
So I'm here to say it's on us. It's on us. It's on us. And we are all Amy Cooper to an extent.
Right. Right. And you think about this to be this other
Democrat.
As a Democrat. And that's what's mind-blowing, is that we've got to do better. That's why I don't even want to focus on what Republicans are doing right now. I don't care what Republicans are doing, because if we can't get it right within ourselves, we have no reason to go out here and tell Republicans how they should be getting it right as well. I think about how quickly we talked about legislating some kind of policy around the mass shootings in this country, and how quickly it took for publicly elected officials to come out and condemn mass shootings in this country. Mm-hmm. And think about that in comparison of what it took for them to condemn the death, the murder of George Floyd. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And the fact that we're now finally going to be able to have to, say something about this, and I tell people the most powerful thing I've read so far is America is so fortunate that the African-American community does not want revenge for 400 years of oppression, but they instead want equality. Mm-hmm. And I think about that everything they're doing is for equality. And, we talk about people, someone said to me, someone people who I really admired a great deal said to me that I condoned the violence of the looting and the fires and the stores having their windows broken by bricks. I never condoned that. But what I said is that a life is more important to me in this country. Any human life is more important. You want to talk about a family values guy? I'm really a family values guy and a pro-life guy, because I do believe that every life in this country is important, not the one that's just in a fetus. I believe a woman should have her right to choose, but I believe that a child at the age of 5 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 70 years old, whatever the case may be, is important, and we've got to protect that life as if it's as precious as whatever is in the womb. So I say this to say, a life is more important to me. A store can be rebuilt. Storefronts can be rebuilt. Corporate entities can simply send their resources back over to rebuild or clean up whatever mess has been made. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that you have to understand that this is 400 years of anger that's generational. And scientists and therapists have seen that it is almost a genetic thing, the PTSD that African Americans feel in regards to their oppression in life. A child gets to talk at 5 years old. I get stopped by a cop, and my heart comes out of my chest, no matter if I'm president of CTYD, no matter if I'm a senior manager at a major nonprofit in our state. It does not matter. What matters is that how we are treated. And that's what I keep trying to tell people. We've got to do better because our citizens do not feel safe. And there should be no compromise to people having a fair, safe, and free life in this country, regardless of their color.
And joy.
That's right. You have to enjoy.
I look at it, I've been reading a lot more about that. I mean, I knew about the generational trauma, but reading more about that and just it struck me right before we went to the protest last week, it was Pastor Al, at the memorial service, Sharpton saying, the knee off the neck isn't about give me extra. It's about let me have the opportunity at the same. It's just mind-boggling that is still something that has to be explained. It's mind-boggling.
Right.
And that's, as a white person, I can't imagine. And again, I cannot, it's the pregnancy thing. I can observe, I can bear witness. I don't know what that is. I don't know. I stand because I'll never understand.
And with the pregnancy thing, I've always said, I don't want to know what it's like to give birth to a child. I don't. And I give women full credit to be in that space and to own that space and to be strong in that space. I don't want to know. But I imagine that white people probably wouldn't want to know what it's like to be in the space of a Black person.
Ask any white person if they would be okay waking up Black tomorrow, and I guarantee you the answer is no.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. And I would also say that, we have to have really serious conversations about where this country's going. It's only going to get worse, right? In the mind of a racist person in this country. Mm-hmm. Because in 1992, Newsweek magazine released an article that said that in the next 25 years, that nearly 40% of America's children would be biracial. Mm-hmm. That we exceeded that in 10 years, and we still exceed that by leaps and bounds in 2020. And so I say this to say, at some point, you think about all of these Republican leaders that have a person of color in their family, that some of them, most of them have been silent. Mitt Romney, has not been silent. He's been out on the front lines, and we have to give him credit where credit is due on that. John Boehner has a Black son-in-law and Black grandchild. You talk about, I think even Themis has some people of color in her family now. And these are real conversations that we need people to realize. If it were your son and your child, you would be on the front lines, no questions asked, guns blazing, ready.
But I have to say, I wanted to go further, because they say that to women all the time. Like, if it was your daughter, if it was your aunt, if it was your grandmother, and that's all fine. That's all fine, well and good, whether we're talking about rape or equal pay or whatever it is. I understand the well-meaning intentions behind that, but I have to say, we've got to stop saying that, because it's about human to human.
Yeah.
And I almost think, is that the switch that has to flip? That your life is as valuable as my life, that your life or your son's life is as valuable as my son's life? I mean, is that the switch? I don't know. I mean, we're all grappling, but
I think the switch is that our children's lives will be more valuable when I don't have to give my child the talk. Mm-hmm. When I don't have to tell my child to look a certain way and dress a certain way and act a certain way and react a certain way. Whereas you don't have to have that conversation with white men, and it's not even just a talk with police. I remember having the conversation about the talk with women. Be careful, consent is always important. Make sure that you're asking about consent time and time again, because as we've seen,
Yeah.
there have been instances where white women throughout history have been caught with black men.
And the
And
first thing they say,
I didn't do it. It was rape. He came after me.
Yep.
And those black men have been killed. Emmett Till's a perfect example.
Yep.
There was a young man, I can't recall, that Oprah had did a big profile on years ago, that served prison time that was wrongly and falsely accused of this.
Yeah.
But you have Brock Turner, who,
Yeah.
rapes a sleeping young underage girl,
Literally unconscious,
and he gets 6 months in prison, but then he gets out in 3 months for good behavior. If that's not the epitome of white privilege in this country, I don't know what is. And the fact that people don't see that, when I try to use that example, it's, oh, but that's a different situation. That's not the same thing. This is about
no, it's much worse.
It is much worse. And blue lives, I'm not gonna. I think I don't. It's not that I'm not grateful for our police officers, at least the good ones. I'm not grateful for the bad ones, but I am grateful for the good ones. But I am going to say this: Blue Lives Matter was a choice. Being black is not a choice, and so you cannot equivalate the two for me, because it's like saying, well, presidents' lives matter. Well, yeah, but it was a choice for them to run for president and to run for public office. You made that choice. And that's what I want people to understand. We didn't choose to be black, and we also didn't choose to be discriminated upon against for so many centuries. It's how it happened. And this is obviously the ramifications of our history as a racist and oppressive country. And I think if America were another country looking at America right now, America would be trying to save America from America.
When we were, we were helping to end apartheid, right? Because it was so bad.
Right.
It was.
Right.
But I think people are looking at us going, and I hear from part of the reason I brought that up is a very good friend of mine who's South African. They frequently, they're still having challenges, and the challenges that they're having, they're reaching out to people in the Trump administration and saying things like, well, what could we be doing differently in order to get back to where we were? Can you imagine?
Probably not the right person to ask.
I mean, so that is just, it's beyond. So I want to get us back, and God knows I would love.
That's right. I can go on about this all day.
I know.
Cut me up at any point.
I so appreciate your openness. I so appreciate your willingness to share true and honest feelings, because we are always trying to not put further burden on our Black friends, on our Latino friends, because we know that it's further burden when white people come at you with, well, what should I do? And how should I do it? And, so I truly, truly appreciate this time, but I do want to make sure that we get to, before we have to finish out, so the elections that Connecticut Young Dems are focused on this cycle, besides president, what are you guys looking to accomplish in elections?
So, we're changing the endorsement process drastically. There is no more, if anyone has ever seen that endorsement questionnaire, it has been, who's your campaign manager? Where are you running? What office are you running for? Do you believe in a woman's right to choose? Yes or no? You just pick a bubble. Now we are requiring that people actually identify pieces of legislation and policy that they will work to enact to help on these certain issues with income, the fight against income disparities, and access to education, and racial justice, and environmental justice, and women's rights. And so for us, I imagine this is going to have to put candidates on the spot and have them choose, and really have some critical thinking. I hear the sirens. There you go. I guess they heard that I said that Blue Lives was a choice. Unfortunately, I apologize, but we are grateful to all of our first responders and public servants.
And the good community police officers.
Yes.
Who are working.
As Donny Osmond once said, one bad apple will ruin the bunch, unfortunately. I think that's what people are feeling right now, but we've got work to do there, and we will do it. But I also say, going back to CTYD, we're focused on elections that just aren't featuring young Dems running for office, because this is such a critical cycle that it's important for us to be in the Valley, It's important for us to be in the rural parts of the state. It's important for us to be in the big cities and small towns. We need to make sure that we have a firewall against Republican policies that are divisive to our state and to our communities in this next cycle. And we need to make sure that we can protect our governor and our constitutional officers as much as we possibly can on the state level and legislate on the city level, making sure that we have common councils and aldermen and city councils and selectmen boards that are able to really put together cohesive, fair, and equitable policies for their communities that will be able to help sustain our state throughout what looks like nationally another economic downturn. So we're not just focused on Young Dems this year. We're focused on getting every Democrat elected. And we will make support. I'll be raising a lot of money with CTYD this year. We'll be raising a lot of resources to support the DTCs because we want to ensure that there's no excuse for us not to have victory in November.
That's great. And so if Young Democrats who are not yet connected, obviously everybody's got to be registered to vote. That's, it seems like such a silly thing to keep harping on, but register to vote. I think everybody's got to get familiar with the absentee ballot process, especially for college students. Yeah. It is going to be hopefully a little easier this year with everybody getting the applications, but it is still a two-step process. You've got to fill out that application. You have to make sure you return that. Then they mail you your ballot. Then you've got to return that. Right. Especially for the college students, because they do have, whether or not no excuse voting passes, the college students have the excuse of being out of town during the election. So if they are registered in the state of Connecticut, they can vote. That's how my daughter will be voting for me for the first time.
And how exciting is that?
Yeah, it's exciting that it's presidential. And I think that's probably more exciting. But I'm super excited that she will get to do that. So,
and I think also, we will be going on a college tour, CTYD, this year.
Oh, nice.
As soon as schools open up, to start talking about the importance of issues within our state and nationally, and why it's important for young people to register. In my car, you open my glove compartment and there are voter registration forms in my glove compartment because I want to make sure that there's no excuse for someone not to have the opportunity to vote. And I implore everyone in this state to do the very same thing for themselves. If you can get 3 to 4 people to register to vote a month between now and the election, imagine the magnitude, right? Michigan, Donald Trump won Michigan by 230,000 votes. And imagine if every person that we're talking to right now was able to just get 4 or 5 people to register to vote and get them to the polls in November. That election, this entire country would be completely different today.
Well, and Democrats are notorious for not showing up to vote. I hate to say it. It's an honest truth. It's, I wish it weren't true, but it is the truth. We are not as good for some reason, which I do not understand, considering the things that the Democratic Party has fought for over the decades. I don't understand why we're worse at it. I also think that maybe we get to a level of comfort and then say, oh, we're good.
Yeah. And they're up in the polls. We're good. We don't need to go. And then we
had Obama. We're all set. No. Not even.
My friends called me at, midnight in 2016. Right. What's going on? What's happening? What's happening? Why is this happening? Well, did you vote? No. Well, that's why this is happening.
Well, and I frequently tell the story that my grandfather at the time, let's see, he's 95 now. So it was, he was 91, almost 92 then, FaceTimed me at 8:30 at night and was like, this looks bad. And this is a man who has literally never missed a primary, a municipal in his entire life.
Right.
And God bless him, still alive, going to be here in November, I'm sure, to vote, in the presidential. He's down in Virginia. I think, we got to get everybody out there, even the 95-year-olds. So I do have one question. Is Connecticut Young Dems talking about completing the census so everyone is counted?
Yes. In fact, our Vice President of Operations and Development, Michael Hernandez, is a part of the census team.
Oh, great.
And he is making it a prime focus to ensure that we get everyone to send in their census forms across the state. And primarily, he's pretty much doing the work here in Stamford. And so what I'm hoping for is that people understand and realize that they don't need to listen to the negative rhetoric around this from the opposite party that does not want you to fill out the census form, because they don't want you to be accounted for, and they don't want you to have a stake in the electoral process, and for your communities to get federal dollars to support very vital needs in your spaces. And so I encourage for everyone to go out. You are protected in this process, to fill out the form, to be as forthcoming as you possibly can be, so that we can continue to build more sustainable communities for the future.
And don't let the questions scare you, or
No, not at all.
fill them out to the best of your ability. Because I definitely was a little surprised at one of the questions.
I think Sally Mae's questions scare me more than the census. So I would tell people, if you can get through the FAFSA and Sally Mae, you can definitely get through this.
That is definitely true. So then the other thing I would say is, if Young Dems want to get involved, they're not currently involved with Connecticut Young Dems. What's the best way? Because we do have a lot of towns that, they have defunct Young Dems chapters at their high schools, because sometimes it's not, passed down, or some of the high schools, it's like, well, we have to have both. Well, you should have both. You should absolutely have Young Dems and Young Republicans, but you shouldn't have nothing.
The things that keep me up at night as my hairline recedes, talking about these, and really, I was just talking to Representative Cara Rochelle about this on Sunday, about what we're doing to reignite and revitalize our local chapters. It's going to be a really tough conversation to have with Democrats across the state, because we've got to do something right now to ensure that we are, one, organizing, and two, recruiting in ways that we've never done before. Will we be as successful in doing that between now and next year? I don't know, but we're going to work on it. And our goal is, as many people who tuned in last week, we had nearly 3,000 people tune in for the State of the CTYD last week. And I'm hoping that everyone is registered to vote, but we are grateful for that, because what we're talking about now is, if you're going to basically run a chapter, we need to make sure that there's a succession plan to keeping that chapter alive. And if we can't find people to run these chapters, do we come in as CTYD to oversee the chapter for the rest of the state until we get leadership trained and in session and in place? It's a hard conversation. And our goal is to make sure that by next May, 1 year from now, next June, that we have nearly a majority of our chapters filled with new leadership or reignited than what they are currently right now. And look, Stanford is, Fairfield County is one of those places where we do have a problem. We have a lack of leadership right now. And that shouldn't be. This should be one of the places where we have a strong leader presence. And so we've got some work to do. And I appreciate you asking that question. For people to get involved, we need people to host house parties for us so we can talk about our vision and our mission and what the work that we're doing, because it's relevant to people who aren't even Young Dems, right? We need to talk about, we need people to volunteer, to go out to knock on doors for candidates. With COVID here, it's going to be a very different type of election than it's ever been before, but we're still going to go out with the proper attire and protective gear to knock on doors for people. There are ways to get people to the polls without even leaving the comfort of your home. Technology is a wonderful thing. Thank God to Al Gore for inventing the internet, because there's so much that you can do through text to ask people if they're going to vote. And the other thing is that we can still make calls. There is power in the grassroots organizing that we've had within our party for years. And we've got to use that power to our advantage this year. So people are going to see us out there still being as active as possible, and that's important. We want people to volunteer, as I said before, but we also need people to contribute. And so our website will be up and running soon, and I hope you'll be able to share that with your viewers and folks in your district. And
Absolutely.
As a favor to me, if you will contribute, because I'm contributing to Emerge CT this year for the next year, and this is what's going to sustain this movement and make sure that we really do change the entire view of our party and of our country and of our state.
You can tell you and I have been professional fundraisers.
If you don't make a plug, you're not doing your job.
Believe me, wholeheartedly agree, because that is with everything. I say that to my kids all the time. If you're, stay on brand, sell.
Right. It's always, now today it's CLC, CTYB, ask for money.
That's right. Some will, some won't. So what next? It's how it is about getting votes too.
My grandmother says you cheapen everything by asking for money all the time. I tell her, yeah, but it's for a good cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has no problem calling people.
Right.
Corey's working for this great early childhood education program, you've got to donate money for it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, who's cheapening the conversations now, right? Who do you think I learned it from?
Well, I too have a grandmother who keeps me humble, so I understand. I understand. Got to have those grandmothers, and she is still fiery at 88. So,
My goodness, and what a blessing it is to have them,
yes.
still at this age.
Yeah.
And I think about my great grandparents and what they really instilled in us about a love and a desire for public service. It was, you need to do something to serve others. Your life, I experienced a great amount of privilege as a Black person, far more than what other Black people have not experienced, and I think that's a monolith, and I have to recognize that. I did go to a private Christian school for a long time. I went to really good public schools afterwards. I got through college, thankfully. I didn't have to deal with a lot of the things that other people have had to deal with in this country, and so I'm cognizant of that. And I want to help let the ladder down for others to climb up so that they can experience the same things that I experienced. And my great grandparents were firmly in the mindset that they wanted their family to be committed to making others' lives better. And I think that's why it's so important for me that this fight is critical. To win this cause is critical. And this is not a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing. This is a lifetime thing. I will go down to the trenches fighting for all people who are oppressed and who are facing inequality, so we can make this world a better place.
That's awesome. And I think you and I have the same mindset. For us, it was, to whom much is given, much is expected. It's in,
I think from the moment we met, it was just like, it was electric. We were running for office at the same time. The energy, we're both high energy people.
We are.
And so I think that always helps.
It does. It does. I cannot thank you enough. This was a gift to me. I think it's a gift to everyone who's watching. I so appreciate your, like I said, your honesty, your willingness to have this conversation tonight. Again, Connecticut Young Dems, we hope that people will get involved. And as Corey said, if you can, make a donation. We certainly have a lot of work to do. We've got a president to elect. We have a whole other host of folks that are running, both at the federal level and the state level. Yours truly. So,
if you could send me when we're done here, are you still raising money?
Nope, I am all good. Thank you. I am
fundraiser in you.
We did it in like 3 days. So,
well, I want to commit myself, and I think that I'm just not about talking the good talk.
Yeah.
But I want to act on it. So if you could send me a schedule of when I can come out, either make calls or knock doors with you, I'm right there for you.
We'll get you on the call list for sure. We're still trying to figure out the door knocking thing. I'll be honest with you. I think that we have to be, even with proper gear and everything else, we have to be mindful of, do people really want us on their doors? It may be more lit drive. We'll get to all that strategy. But and I love knocking doors, because I feel truly that if I don't get those stories from people, then how effective can I be? I mean, that has been even highlighted for me more with the phone calls that I've received during COVID, and trying to get people the help that they need, and especially with Department of Labor, and especially with, just where do I find this? Or I saw something that I, didn't think was, I got another one today. Who do I report such and such? Okay, So, but again, the small acts of service, they go into large acts of service, and that's how you move the needle towards a better world, I believe. So thank you again. And we're going to say goodbye to everybody on Facebook, but thank you so much, Corey. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, take care.